For the last 2 months, everyone in my town has been absolutely stir-crazy about Halloween. Yeah, you heard that correctly. 2 full months of people talking about Halloween, decorating their homes in advance. Hell, even the stores were completely stocked full of costumes, candy, and creepy decorum. Look, I get it. I love Halloween as much as the next guy, but even I think starting that early is a bit much. But I guess some people will like what they like, I suppose. I didn't start decorating my house until it was actually October. I was debating on whether or not to even bother decorating, but my girlfriend, Jessica, was adamant that we embrace the holiday spirits. Yes, she said spirits. With a facepalm and a heavy sigh, I surrendered. Now, there were a lot of choices when it came to Halloween shopping. We had the Mega Mart up the street, which had a section dedicated solely to the holiday. Though, like I mentioned previously, it had been mostly ransacked, and the moment they got new merchandise in stock, it lasted maybe an hour. We drove around for a bit, searching here and there for other novelty shops and the like, though every place we stopped at had next to nothing. Feeling tired and defeated, Jess and I resigned to trying again in a couple of days. On our way back home is when we saw it. A small little thrift shop, with large letters plastered in orange across the rather expansive front window. The letters spelled out, Halloween Extravaganza, with small print underneath reading, While Supplies Last. Figuring it was another dead end, I honestly didn't want to stop there, but I could see the look in her eyes and she wouldn't take no for an answer. So we pulled into the parking lot and made our way into the store. Walking inside, you could instantly tell that this place was a Goodwill-esque thrift shop. Racks of mildewy clothing and old toys littered the walls. It reeked of dust and neglect inside. However, in the center of the small shop was a surprisingly large assortment of Halloween items. Full costumes, bags of candy by the truckload, and almost every possible decoration you could think of, minus the 30-foot inflatable spider. They had apparently sold out of it a couple weeks ago. Jessica quickly went to work grabbing a cart and piling on every small thing she could find. She would shout at me from across the shop, hold up a random item, then nod repeatedly until I nodded back. To say she was crazy about Halloween would be an understatement. We were dragging the overflowing cart to the checkout counter when something in a box of old junk caught my eye. It was a doll. Normally, I wouldn't look twice at a random toy, but this didn't look like any random toy. It looked like one of those Voodoo dolls. What's more is that the doll kind of actually looked like me. It was wearing a tiny white t-shirt, as well as some blue jeans. It even had a bit of black hair that parted in a way similar to mine. Before I knew it, Jessica had completely finished checking out on her own, while I stared at this doll. She tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I was all right. I nodded, then looked back at the doll. She walked over to it and picked it up, mentioning that the doll did kind of look like me. A little bit. She turned to me and said, "Let's get it," and before I could have a say in the matter, it was rung up and bagged. We made it home, and without wasting any time, Jess and I got to work decorating the inside and the outside of our house. I placed cobwebs and fake spiders over our small hedges in the front yard, and Jess put up laminated monsters on our windows. The sun had halted our progress, and we called it a day. The next day, Jess had to go to work while I remained at home. I had a few days off, so I had the joy of putting up the remainder of the decorations. A skeleton on the front porch, tossing fake severed limbs throughout the lawn, and stringing lights along the railings and around the windows. After hours of work, I finally finished decorating our house. Even though I wasn't nearly as jazzed about Halloween as my significant other, I was quite impressed with how everything looked. I made my way back inside and was tossing out some of the leftover bags when I picked up one and something fell out of it. It was that doll from before. We must have forgotten to take it out when we had gotten home. I picked the doll up and looked it over. It didn't quite look like me anymore after I had changed my clothing. I sat down on the couch and set the doll on the coffee table in front of me. I stared at it for a few moments, trying desperately to summon up any knowledge I had of voodoo dolls. It was very little, and anything I thought I knew was from movies and TV shows. I got up and retrieved a pin from Jess's makeup drawer and sat back down. I picked the doll up and I pressed the pin into the arm of the doll. Nothing happened. I felt nothing. No pain, no tingle, nothing. I laughed at myself for foolishly believing in voodoo. Then I grabbed my lighter out of my pocket and lit the arm of the doll on fire. The fire burned for a bit, then I patted it out. Still nothing. I wondered what the hell I was doing torturing this poor defenseless doll. In any case, it was a pretty good stress reliever. I actually felt better after messing around with the doll for a bit. Jess got home about an hour or so later and complimented me on a job well done. We ate dinner and chatted for a bit while we watched some TV in the living room. She noticed the doll sitting on the table with scorch marks on one arm and a pin sticking out of the other, and asked me what I did. I was honest with her. I tested the doll to see if it was real, but told her that nothing had happened. She pondered what I said for a moment, then replied with, "At least he's still cute." I chuckled at the remark. I picked the doll up and pinned him to our corkboard in the kitchen and replied, "Well, now you can see him whenever you want." We both smiled to each other and then went to bed. The next morning, I received a phone call from the thrift store while Jess was at work. They called to inquire about the doll I had just purchased. I wondered how they got my number in the first place, but apparently Jess had signed us up for their Super Savings memberships. She's always signing us up for stores that we never go back to. Anyways, they called to inform me that the previous owner of the doll was trying to locate it, and they asked if it was all right if they gave her our phone number. I said it was fine, and they hung up. Around 20 minutes later, my phone rang once again. This time, the voice of an older woman greeted me on the other line. She asked if I had purchased the doll from the thrift store, to which I said yes. She then offered to buy it back from me. Confused at the strange request, I asked her why she would want it. She then told me that her family had recently put her into a retirement home, selling and donating all of her old stuff from her house. It had apparently taken her quite a while to track down where her things had gone to. Then she told me something that I found pretty hard to believe. She said that she was a voodoo priestess, that her mother and grandmother before her each were as well. They would brew potions and make little pouches of herbs to sell to a customer as sort of a side hobby. The old woman said that she used to take commissions from people to create voodoo dolls for them, so they could seek revenge on someone. Truth be told, I almost hung up the phone then and there. She then went on to ask me if I had done anything with the doll. I told her that I had pinned it to my corkboard, omitting the burning part. If she did want it back, I didn't want her to think that I was the one that burned it. The line went quiet for a bit. Then she told me to forget the doll and to have a good day. She hung up, and I couldn't help but stare at the doll, which returned the same confused gaze back at me. I walked up to it, wondering if what I had just heard was true or not. That's when I remembered something I had previously overlooked, something that made my blood run cold and sent a shiver like needles shooting down my spine. Just as my mind was connecting the dots, My phone rang once again. This time it was my mother. I could hear the tears in her voice, but I already knew what she was going to tell me. I have a twin brother, whom I hadn't seen in years. He's somewhat of a hermit and likes to be alone, so meeting up with him is difficult. She said he was found in his apartment today, and when she spoke to the police, she demanded to know what happened. After arguing back and forth, the police told her that he was found pinned to a wall with a large knife. His right arm was bleeding, and his left arm had been burned so badly it was completely black. When she told me this, I felt my knees grow weak. I wanted to vomit. She asked me if he had called me recently, and I told her no. I told her how sorry I was, and through her tears she thanked me, but I could tell she didn't realize how sorry I actually was. I tried to call the voodoo lady back using the same number, but when I did, the line just rang endlessly. After an hour, Jess came home to find me sulking on the couch, with the doll resting on the coffee table. I told her everything that had happened. She couldn't believe what I had told her. I didn't blame her. I could hardly believe it myself. I asked her what we should do with the doll, and she suggested that we bury it, though I didn't even want to look at the doll again, let alone touch it. She offered to bury the doll for me, not out of fear or worry, but out of compassion and respect. She took it out to the garden in a shoebox and buried it between the roses. While she did this, I tried to tell myself that it wasn't actually my fault, that some maniac had killed my brother, but deep down I knew I was the maniac. I killed my brother. I had stabbed him, burned him, and pinned him to the wall. Even though I had no idea what would happen, that doesn't make me feel any better. I have so many questions, like who that lady was, or how this was even possible. But what I really want to know is who was the person who commissioned that lady to make the voodoo doll in the first place? I may never find out. I just hope to God they don't make a doll out of me next.